Hey everybody, we've got another middle school match this week, and we've got Lorian, who is our returning champion, against David. And I think we got a pretty interesting match here. I know someone in the league told me this week that one of the decks in this matchup they thought was the best deck. So, I don't know, Eric, you want to talk a little bit about the two decks we have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the decks that we have here are really emblematic of the stuff that you can do in the format. And today we have Lorian playing blue-black Stifle Naught, which for those in the know is basically a blue-black. I would say almost a control deck because it plays a bunch of counter magic, but it ends up winning the game with the pretty classic Phyrexian Dreadnought Stifle combo. So you get 2 mana and 2 cards for a 12/12, pretty attractive. And then he's paired up against David, who's playing, I would say, a pretty interesting mono green elf ball list. So he's playing all the classic elf cards, like all the mana generators and that sort of thing. But he's also playing the full 4 survival of the fittest, and then a bunch of interesting one-of tutor targets that allow him to play sort of a toolbox strategy. And there's a lot of really interesting strategies available in the format, so he gets some counterplay against everything. So it should be a pretty exciting time watching these two face off.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both of these decks, I've seen a lot of different builds of Elves and a lot of different builds of Stifle Naught. So I know Lorian's Stifle Naught build here is very all in on the combo. So he's basically just playing 3 ways to disruption and or cheap ways. He's got 4 Duresses, 4 Force of Wills, Dazes, and he's got the full 8 copies of 4 Stifle, 4 Vision Charm, and then a bunch of cheap card draw. I think if he does his thing on turn 1, turn 2, which he's playing Lotus Petals, so he can do it pretty quickly, I think there's no way the Elf deck can win game 1. Game 2 and 3, he's got a little more game because he's got some stuff in the sideboard to deal with the Dreadnought. All right, looks like they're drawing hands. Eric, did I lose your audio? Are you still there? It looks like Eric's taking a mulligan, and which is probably not uncommon. He's playing a combo deck. He's probably just going to mulligan aggressively to find his 2 pieces.
Hey, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I had an audio issue there. Yeah, do you happen to know who's on the play and draw here?
I didn't catch. I think they did odd even, and I had no idea what they said. So,
well, I think people choose odd most of the time. So, if it was odd, let's say whoever wasn't rolling the die won, which I think it might have been David.
Yeah, so it looks like David kept 7 and Lorian went down to 6. So it looks like he's keeping his 6 and a card on bottom. All right, we'll see who takes the initiative here and goes first.
Yeah, and you have to imagine whoever is on the play here has a pretty big advantage. Simply because I think they're both decks that are trying to win relatively fast, and just the tempo advantage of getting to go first, I think, is a pretty big deal in a matchup like this. Yeah.
I definitely I think that the Dreadnought deck is definitely faster unless it has to spin its tires for a while finding the pieces. I think that's the risk as in this matchup for Lorian, is if he has to just cast a bunch of portents and stuff trying to find the Dreadnought, he can die really quickly to this elf deck.
Yeah, absolutely. But he is packing 4 Force of Will, 2 Daze, 2 Counterspell, as well as a Boomerang. So he does have quite a bit of interaction. If he's not able to find the Phyrexian Dreadnought or the Stifle, he should have some tools to buy time.
That's true, yeah. He's also playing 4 Duress, which is really pretty bad in this matchup. I think the only thing it hits in David's deck is Survival.
Yeah, I think in the main deck that might be the only target. So unless he happens to sort of nab one on turn 2, it's probably not going to do anything. Oh, actually, there's also 2 copies of Biorhythm in the Elf deck, which is so potential kill condition there that will actually get hit by Duress.
That's true. That's true, man. Yeah, Biorhythm is an interesting card. I like how cute it is, but like I'm not sure how good it is. But
yeah, I think it's 8 mana, and in some ways it's good against the control decks because they typically don't have any creatures in play, so it's pretty strong. But then you're also trying to resolve like an 8 mana spell against a control deck,
right.
which is a pretty big ask. So it is cute and it's an interesting card, but I think it could be challenging against the heavy counter spell strategies.
Yeah. So Lorien, just setting up on turn 1 was important, and we have a what's that card called? Wirewood Symbiote.
Yeah, that's a Wirewood Symbiote. Typically in the Elf decks to help them play against removal spells, but not really much interaction with the board going on the Stifle Naught side of things. So I don't think it's going to have as much efficacy here as it normally does.
Yeah, I think he's going to just use it to like help generate value with these like acolytes and stuff. It's kind of a slow start for the Elf deck because he's got no mana acceleration here. So kind of like an awkward hand, I think. But usually you want to start with a mana dork and just end a turn going to bounce back his acolyte rather than pay the echo.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good value engine, especially because it's going to be difficult for the Stifle Naught player to interact with here.
Yeah, I'm thinking Lorien just doesn't have it. I think he would have just slammed it against mono green on turn 2.
Right. But some people play main deck Naturalize, and he could have got caught by it.
Right. I think Eric's laughing a little bit. Eric and I actually got paired this week, and we're paired in the losers bracket, so you're going to get only the best.
It's not the losers bracket. It's the love of the game bracket.
But I got him with my one of main deck Naturalize in our first game, so.
Yeah, and that'd be pretty good. I was playing a green-white Enchantress deck that's trying to win with Earthcraft Swirl Nest, and Naturalize got me pretty good game 1. Was not playing around it. Yeah, but interestingly, David here is just continuing to deploy Elves, but still no true mana accelerant. When you are light on lands, Quirion Ranger can sort of help accelerate you, which looks like
what's going to happen here. He doesn't have a 3rd land, so Quirion Ranger is representing the 3rd land drop.
What are we going to get for that 3 mana?
Another Acolyte.
Yeah, so
I'm really curious what's in his hand if he doesn't have any mana dorks and he doesn't have any more lands.
Yeah, I mean, there are some expensive spells in the Elf deck. So, like the couple copies of Biorhythm that we had talked about, a Collar of the Claw, as well as like a Cabal. And then there's also 4 copies of Hermit Druid as well to pair with the 4 Gaia's Cradle. So
you mean Deranged Hermit, right?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Deranged Hermit, yeah.
Is this a end of turn Limdol's Vault, I guess?
It looks like it, yeah.
Try to find the other piece. So I feel like a 12/12 is bound to be coming this turn because Limdol's Vault is almost Demonic Tutor or Vampiric Tutor. It's just a very complicated Vampiric Tutor.
It's an incredibly well-designed magic card, if you ask me. But yeah, Limdol's Vault, one of the weird old cards for those not in the know. Basically, it's a 2-mana instant, blue-black. You look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you get to make a choice. You can either choose one of them and put it into your hand, or put all 5 on the bottom and then pay 1 life and repeat the process.
I don't think you put it in your hand. I think you choose you keep the 5 and put them back on top of your library in any order.
Yeah, I think you're right. But that's why it's more akin to Vampiric Tutor than Demonic, right? But yeah, it's basically in a 2-card combo deck. It's a 2-mana spell that basically sets you up to always find the other piece that you need. and it looks perfect. It's sort of like the perfect card in this blue-black Stifle Naught list. Very much the A plus B style combo deck.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it can sometimes find you both pieces because you can just keep flipping through the top 5 until you find 5, a 5 that has both pieces. Now, you might never find that, I guess, but
yeah.
I guess we get to see what's hiding over here. My video feed for David's a little choppy, so actually I'm having a hard time seeing.
Yeah, it actually just dropped for me as well, so we're going to be in the dark here. But you have to imagine that this duress signals that he's ready to deploy his Stifle Naught, and he's just making sure that the coast is clear. And we
floating
see
2 mana and gushing.
gushing.
Well, he knows what cards are there, so
yeah.
Looks like he did hit a biorhythm. I got David's feedback. So the duress hit a biorhythm. See another Quirion Ranger. Can't tell what else is there. Maybe a couple deranged tournaments.
I see. Yeah, I also see a Wirewood symbiote.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we have a phased out Phyrexian Dreadnought, and next time it phases in, it's going to be attacking in for a big chunk of damage.
Yeah. Not sure what he can really do about this. I don't think he has anything that he can draw on the main deck that answers it. And I don't think he can race off of the current amount of mana he has. Like, I guess if he draws a Cradle, he can maybe deploy a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I think drawing Cradle into one of his sort of big threats is a path to victory this game. I think you sort of correctly identified. He's limited on mana right now, and Cradle is going to be the best way for him to generate mana. Well-Wisher, very similar, but too slow. And also, the symbiotes don't count for Well-Wisher notably, so Gaia's Cradle just much better in this scenario and in general.
Yeah, I think the one thing Well-Wisher can do is I think he'll be able to gain enough. Oh, he's going to counter it actually. I think he could gain enough life off of a Well-Wisher that he could get 1 extra turn, but not if it doesn't resolve. So.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the David stream is just not working for me, so I'm only able to look at the action from the side of the Stifle Naught player here. Oh, it actually just came back.
Yeah, same for me.
And then I will.
All right, so it looks like he did draw a land and deployed a 3rd Quirion Ranger, but I just don't see how he's beating this 12/12 with trample.
Yeah, I mean, notably, he does have a total of 3 toughness on the table, which is effectively 3 extra life if you're willing to throw it in front of the Dreadnought. And you have to imagine that next turn he's going to be able to deploy enough toughness so that way he can get to lift an extra turn. But throwing away creatures in front of the Dreadnought means that Cradle is no longer that mana boost, and it seems like it's just slowly going to die over a couple turns here.
Yeah, I mean, if he does draw a Cradle here, he has I still couldn't really tell what he had in his hand, but a deranged tournament is a lot of toughness, so he could potentially play a deranged tournament and attack for 3, and then block and then play another deranged tournament. I'm not sure. I don't think that's enough still, but the good news is I think that Elf player gets a lot of tools post board to help. And I think it's hard for Lorien to keep duresses in, although maybe he does, but he gets some naturalizes to bring in. Yeah. He gets an orangutan to bring in that he can survival for. And he'll be on the play, so he gets kind of that tempo advantage too, which is what this game's going to be all about.
Yeah. Is that another Acolyte? It looks like it. Notably, David also does have 1 copy of Crop Rotation in his deck, so that's effectively a 5th copy of Gaia's Cradle here.
Right. I do think this is probably a pretty bad matchup for Elves in general. I mean, I think Elves does not want to play against fast combo decks, but then they have to race them, and I don't think they're usually well positioned to do that.
Yeah, and I think just from sort of like a very high level, the Elf deck just tends to be extremely low on interactive elements, and effectively they're both combo decks, but one combo deck is also playing a bunch of force wheels and counter spells. So you have to think that they're favored in the matchup because they get to pick and choose their spots with those sort of spells, and you just don't have that sort of optionality with the Elf deck.
Right.
Let's see here. So it looks like we're doing some Quirion Ranger tricks to help ramp a little bit, and that's going to let David deploy another Acolyte. Okay. So continuing to draw cards here. Let's see. David's currently at 8 life. He has 5 toughness in play. So, if he trumps with all 5 creatures here, he'll go to 1.
Right. Not exactly what you want to be doing, but it's
that's a line to not lose the game, not to win the game.
I think if he
returns the Quirion Ranger to his hand, that means 8 damage is going to get through.
Yeah. Unless I missed something.
Yeah, it's possible that we missed something here. Some of the cards are difficult to make out on David's side. But regardless, I don't think it matters here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like we're going to game 2. All right. So while the players are sideboarding, I think we can probably let the viewers know what they have in their sideboards. And on the Elf side of things, we have 3 Naturalize, 1 Elvish Champion, 1 Uktabi Orangutan, 1 Nantuko Vigilante, 1 Spore Frog, 1 Genesis, 1 Collar of the Claw, 1 the Elf from the Gem Palm cycle, 2 Tormod's Crypts, an additional copy of Mastercore, and 2 Nullrod. So lots of 1-ofs to pair with their survival. And you have to imagine that the 3 Naturalize are going to come in, as well as the Uktabi Orangutan, just to answer an onboard Dreadnought. And then he'll probably make some room in the main deck for those by taking out things like Mastercore and in the Squee.
Yeah, I think the Vigilante as well. I mean, that's another answer. And Spore Frog is actually kind of interesting to me because I think you can definitely get in a situation where like you have several creatures on board and they get a Dreadnought on board, and 1 Fog might be enough for you to win that race. So like the Spore Frog is kind of interesting to me, like as just like another card that might help you. Like I don't love Biorhythm. I mean, it is a way to maybe win instantly. Like I think you could take out Squee, Mastercore. But beyond that, it's like I'm not sure exactly what you're cutting. You're probably cutting the Collar of the Claw because you're not going to be facing any removal.
Yeah, and honestly, like the Wirewood symbiotes, they're not great in this matchup. It's obviously an extremely strong card, but the blue-black deck is really low on removal spells, and the game plan of like reoccurring an Acolyte or something like that's really slow, and I don't think that's the kind of game plan you want to be playing. So if you're
playing a game of attrition, you're winning. That's like as the Elf player, I think, because the blue-black player's combo like burns up 2 cards, and so I think if it's an attrition matchup, you're winning anyway. So like I could see you cutting some number of symbiotes and or acolytes because you don't have a really fancy echo.
I definitely agree that the biorhythms don't look great. So what do we have in the sideboard for Lorien?
Yeah, so lost the image. So Lorien's got 3 Annuls, 3 Hydroblast, 3 Engineered Plagues, a Rushing River.
I kept a real Nerdle Fest as a hand. It was like a good value hand.
So, Annuls, Hydroblast, I don't think those are doing anything. I mean, technically the Null can hit the survival, but he didn't see a survival. 3 Engineered Plagues are obviously insane. I'm actually a little bit surprised at 3 Engineered Plagues, like a 3-drop from this like pretty mana lean deck. but and I wouldn't think that tribal matchups would generally be a bad matchup, but obviously they're insane. Like he's going to bring them in. I think if he resolves one, like the elf player is just probably going to lose, or they have to like
pretty much lights out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he can naturalize it or vigilante it, but like it's just he's gonna lose so much time because he's gonna lose his board before that happens.
Yeah, and it seems a little surprising to see the 3 engineered plague, but when you sort of take a step back and look at the format, this Elves deck does see quite a bit of play, and then there's also goblins as well, and it's just an insane card in both of those matchups. And I think we've actually seen just in the Romancing the Stones League over the last couple times we've played, like people like playing those decks and they bring them. So it seems like Lorien was aware of that and preparing.
Yeah, Lorien didn't want to lose to the guy who won last week with goblins, which was Lorien. But yeah, I think so. I think the engineered plays and the ghastly demises, like, and I'd be like just really tempted to take out duresses if I were Lorien. Like, your opponent's probably going to bring in something the duress can hit, but you're still going to be pretty light on target.
Right.
And so
honestly, with the force of wills and counter spells, you already have more counter spells than the number of sideboard cards they're probably going to be bringing in that can destroy an artifact. So the duresses are almost redundant because your engineer plagues are covering most of their elves, and honestly, they're usually just 1-mana 1/1s, so you don't really care about them anyway. Post board, I think the counter spells are sort of earmarked for the sideboard cards, and those duresses can get out. The boomerang can probably go, and then maybe on the draw you cut a daze or something like that.
Yeah,
if you need the room.
Yeah, I think the last 2 leagues we had an elf deck make top 8, and I think, or maybe one of them made top 8, one of them didn't. And one of those was like splashing white for Armageddon, which I don't think would help much. But the other one was splashing blue for opposition, which a resolved opposition in Elves beats basically anything, including a 12/12.
Yeah, 12/12 is not doing much when it just gets tapped down every turn, right?
Right. But it does, that is a 4-mana spell and probably the most relevant spell against a deck full of counter spells. But anyway, off to a start that you want to be off to, having a mana accelerant. Lorien also played a mana accelerant, but did not try to go for a turn 1 dreadnought. So either he's going to be looking for some pieces or he's waiting for some protection.
Yeah, and notably a David on a mulligan to 6 here again. But the accelerant does help there a bit, and the Acolyte is actually going to help mitigate that mulligan as well. Hopefully, we see a second land from him here. Land Wirewood Symbiote would actually be great, so that way he's not going to be thinking about paying that echo cost next turn. But it looks like David might not have another land.
Yeah.
Oh, no, there it is.
Does have a land. Yeah, I don't think he's thinking about paying the echo pretty much no matter what, unless his hand is just full of nothing.
There we go.
It might be full of nothing, though, so let's see. Oh, end of turn, cracking probably a Lindol's Vault here.
Yeah, I was going to say. Wow. And you have to imagine if Lorien kept 7 and he has a turn 1 Limdul's Vault, he's looking to play a turn 2 Dreadnought.
Right. Yeah, that's my assumption. He's probably got he probably has a Force of Will for protection, or he might not. But if he's got a piece in a Limdul's Vault on turn 1, he's happy with that hand to just go for a turn 2 Dreadnought, I think.
I think even without a Force of Will, you keep a turn 2 Dreadnought on the draw.
Yeah.
It might be too slow with naturalize and the Uktabi orangutan, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think you're just jamming it and then hope it lives. But...
you don't show up with Stifle Naught and not keep turn 2 Dreadnought hands, right?
Right.
That's what you're signing up for.
Yeah. I've definitely played my share of degenerate combo decks, and you just go for it.
Oh yeah, I'm a combo player at heart and vintage, and honestly, like I've been trying to come up with new formats where playing 4 Mind's Desire is like a reasonable thing, because I just want to do that again for one tournament. Like, I'm a degenerate combo player at heart, and yeah, it's sometimes you throw your hand against theirs, and that's what playing combo is sometimes, you know.
So interesting, Lorien did not go for it. He kept 5 cards on top and then cast a Portent, which so maybe he is waiting to have some protection. I think it's a little bit risky against Elves, so we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah. The other thing that could be happening here is he could just be trying to set up an Engineered Plague, right?
That's possible. That's true. Yeah, Engineered Plague would be quite a blowout on this board. But it looks like we're about to.
Yeah. Well, Deranged Tournament could change that, right?
Yeah. Well, the Deranged Tournament will protect the squirrels.
Wow, Force on the Acolyte. Interesting.
It's
oh no, that was a
Hermit.
Yeah.
It's Deranged Tournament. Yeah. I think, if you're in David's shoes, that's exactly what you want to see happen, though. Like, you see the Force of Will getting burned on just one of your creatures and not one of your ways to kill a Dreadnought. Interestingly, he left up a green mana and passed the turn here, and a Quirion Ranger? Or he must have played one of those Elves this turn?
I wasn't able to follow it closely, but he could be holding up Naturalize here.
But I think he still only has 1 mana, right? The Quirion Ranger can untap the other Elf, so yeah.
Right.
Holding up Naturalize.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, so not going to try to naturalize in response, but maybe that's just because he knows he can wait to be able to afford to pay the tax on a daze.
Yeah, there's that, but was he Hellbent? I think he just drew a card and it was his only card in hand.
Yeah,
well, that's a pretty.
His Elf must have just had Summoning Sickness then.
Yep. Gets in for 4.
I did not realize he was Hellbent. So now countering that Deranged Tournament makes perfect sense.
Yeah. It's just a small thing here. David did play his land for the turn as a forest, and it's not doing anything here. So like when you're playing a game like this and you're in a position where you have a card in hand like a forest that does absolutely nothing to change the battlefield at all, just keep it in your hand, right? It's never going to do anything for you, and it potentially bluffs something like a Naturalize, right?
Right. Yeah.
And
maybe Lorien just casts a. He's casting Portent targeting his opponent, which is
that must be a fun card to resolve online.
But I mean, this is a great play because like he can basically guarantee that he does not find an answer this turn, and he gets to get a second attack in with the Dreadnought. So I think it's basically just locking up the victory. We're going to do a dramatic reveal of these cards.
Well, I think maybe David is holding his eyes closed or something like that.
Yeah, none of these cards do anything anyway. So I think they will stay on top and probably does not care what order they're in. Probably let him draw the Cradle first.
Let him draw the Cradle, and then maybe the Fentorn Elves, and that's going to be all she wrote.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely not the matchup I think Elves wants to play against. And like you have a little bit of game post board, but obviously he mulled the 6 and still didn't have it, and probably just felt like he can't mull the 5 looking for interaction because his opponent's got a deck full of counter spells anyway.
Yeah,
he did have a reasonable hand with a pretty quick Deranged Tournament that got countered, but yeah,
Force of Will continues to be a strong card, and I think David realizes his fate here and packs it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Stifle Naught deck is very strong. There's a lot of different ways to build it. I think in our first league I played, first Romancing the Simple league I played, we had a player make top 4 with the blue-white version.
Yeah.
And
Mother of Ruin, Swords to Plowshares, Meddling Mage. Yeah. Disruptive elements.
Definitely a lot of ways to build it. Duress and Limdol's Vault are obviously a big appeal to go into black.
Yeah.
And so but it's very powerful. I mean, you put a 12/12 trample out and play on turn 2. The downside is you burn 2 cards to do it, and it's vulnerable to both artifact hate and creature removal and counter spells. So.
Yeah, I mean, Swords to Plowers is the premier removal spell in the format. You could probably make the argument that Lightning Bolt is actually better in the format, but just getting your Phyrexian Dreadnought swords has to feel pretty bad.
Yeah,
but when you back it up with Force of Will, Daze, Counterspell, I think you can sort of jockey for positions in a game, and you can set it up with Duress and that sort of thing. And honestly, I really like the look of this blue-black build. Limbu's Vault is just absolutely the perfect card for the deck.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And having the disruptive elements of Duress and a lot of counter magic is just great.
Yeah. All right, well, I think we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with our second match, which, this match is pretty quick, but I think the next one, we probably got a little bit, little less combo going on, so we'll see what happens in that one.
Yeah, and it features some pretty sweet cards that, we might not see in other places.
All right.
We'll get their time to shine.
We'll be back in a few minutes.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Oh, actually, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, welcome back. I'm Andrew, and Eric's here with me, and we've got our second match for today. Steve versus Ben, and I think it'll be quite a different type of game than the last match we had. Seeing some of the wide variety of decks that get played in this format.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, honestly, I think one of my favorite things about this format is that it just feels extremely wide, in the sense that the best strategies, there are, I think, a handful of like the quote unquote best decks in the format, but there's just a huge number of decks that are lying just below the surface in terms of power level. And I think we're looking at some of that stuff here. Steve has brought a really, really cool green-white Armageddon deck, but he's definitely playing sort of like a threshold sub-theme with 4 Werebear, 4 Wild Mongrel, and then he has Terravoros, Mox Diamonds, and then the aforementioned Armageddons. And to help protect his stuff, he has some Mother of Runes, and then a couple other small toolbox cards along the way, like Naturalize, Seal of Cleansing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, he also has a pair of land taxes. So there are a lot of land tax decks in this format, and this isn't really one of them. This is a deck that just happens to be playing a couple of land taxes. So he's not playing, scroll rack land tax. He just has a pair of land taxes that, can get him value as a Mox Diamond deck.
Yeah, and he's actually able to utilize the extra cards from land tax in a couple of other ways. He's able to discard extra cards to Wild Mongrel to help grow it. He also has 1 copy of Android Brushhopper, which is definitely an old school card that doesn't see much play, but able to utilize extra cards that way. And then to help sort of keep the cards flowing, he also has 2 copies of Sylvan Library. So a couple ways to get extra cards in the hand. And a couple different ways to utilize them. And then he's got Terravor and Armageddon as his, I would say, big finishers.
Yeah. There is like a class of decks in this format in pre-modern called Terrageddon, and I think this is one of them. This is I think it's kind of his own take on it.
Yeah.
Where you just play Terravor and Armageddon, and that's the game plan.
That's just good deck building.
What you play around it, is I think there's a lot of customization, and he's definitely he's got a couple of cards that are probably a bit of pet cards for him. He's got like a 1 of Brushhopper, as you mentioned, a 1 of Weathered Wayfarer, and
I think the right number of land tax is 5, honestly. So
so it's a cool deck. Armageddon is a centerpiece of can be a centerpiece of a number of decks in this format. If you can get ahead and cast an Armageddon, that's lights out. So and that's clearly what his game plan is. He's got some cheap creatures, and he's got Armageddons, and he's got Mox Diamonds as well. So
yeah. And on the other side of the table, we have something very interesting and extremely reminiscent of playing Magic 15 years ago. We have a mono black deck, but we're actually not sure of all the cards in it, and that's because it's an extremely low resolution photo. And the cards I'm able to make out are Phyrexian Negator, Duress, a couple Lake of the Dead, a couple of City of Traders. I think I see a few scroll racks in there, maybe not. Maybe
I definitely saw
therapies.
Hatred. Hatred is definitely.
Oh, is he playing Carnifage as well? A little bit more aggro slanted.
I'm not sure. I didn't, the fact that it's playing Hatred, I just want to call it Suicide Black, even though I can't really tell what most of the cards in the deck are. Which is definitely I remember playing at the comic shop in my hometown. This is a deck that one of my friends had, and a deck that I would see other people playing. The thing is, though, it was I remember playing this deck in Standard. But Standard had Dark Ritual, and Dark Ritual notably is not legal in this format. But on the flip side, you do get to play some other powerful black cards in this format that weren't legal in that Standard format. So definitely an aggressive black deck. I think it'll be a little interesting, because I think the green-white deck generally just wants to get ahead on board and then close the door with Armageddon. I think that might be hard to do against an aggressive black deck. It might be hard for him to just get ahead. But on the flip side, I think the green-white deck has Swords to Plowshares as a very efficient removal spell, and also has some ways of generating card advantage, which mono black decks, unless he's playing Necropotence, I doubt has many ways of getting card advantage.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't see any Necropotence in here, and a sort of another nod in the favor of the mono black deck is that 4 copies of Duress and 4 copies of Cabal Therapy are going to allow him to play a pretty reasonable game, in the sense that he's going to do a pretty good job of making sure that the green-white Terrageddon deck doesn't have access to one of those big finishers. And those are definitely, I would say, the strongest cards in the deck. And if you sort of remove that aspect of the game plan from the green-white deck, then I think it's going to struggle a little bit. So I think I
didn't make out the Cabal Therapies at first, but it does look like he does have 4 Cabal Therapies.
Yeah.
And I think those are Curse Scrolls as well. I think I see Dolphy Slayer, so like the 2-mana 2/2 Shadow guy.
Maybe.
So, yeah.
I guess we'll see.
We'll see. I do think he does have Phyrexian Negator, which is a very high variance card. For those of you that may have not played back then, 3-mana 5/5, but whenever it takes damage, you sack permanents equal to the amount of damage that it takes.
Yeah, and just to make sure you're hearing that correctly, if you Lightning Bolt a Phyrexian Negator, they have to sacrifice 3 permanents. Pretty rough.
Fortunately, he's playing against a deck without red, so he's probably not going to get lightning bolted, but his opponent does have a lot of creatures, which can make it a little awkward to attack with a Phyrexian Negator.
Yeah, it's definitely a high variance card for sure. Yeah, but it did see a lot of play back in its day.
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, like, this era of Magic was very very like known for combo decks. And so there were, a lot of meta games in which, you're likely to just be playing against a combo deck. And if you're planning to play aggressive black deck, just playing a 3-mana 5/5 is great if your opponent is just trying to do their own thing.
Not to mention, there were formats where you could play Dark Ritual with it. So turn 1 5/5 against a combo deck, that's a pretty strong play if they're not going to be able to interact with it.
Yeah, especially if you can follow that up with a Duress to disrupt them. So, and that's clearly the game plan. And there are a lot of combo decks in this format. I think we see a wide variety of stuff in this format. Fair decks, combo decks, burn decks. So it's a card that I feel like more comfortable with if I were playing it in my sideboard. But I respect that someone wants to bring the 5/5s.
Definitely helping bring the deck its namesake, for sure.
Yeah, Suicide Black, for sure. Yeah, and Hatred, I think, is the card that I think, to me, is like, the source of the name of the deck, where it's a 5-mana sorcery, or instant. I think 5-mana instant.
Yeah.
But it gives a creature +X+O, where X is the amount of life you choose to pay. So you can just pay 19 life and give your creature +19 power. And a little tougher in this format, but when you can play Dark Ritual, you could play turn 1 Carnophage, turn 2 kill you with double Dark Ritual. And it's pretty, led to some pretty disgusting things.
Yeah, it was one of the cards a long time ago that people really complained about, because if at any point the creature's power that you were targeting plus your life total was more than your opponent's life total, then the game was over, right? So it's, when you're playing an aggressive deck, it's pretty easy to set something like that up, and it really forced your opponent to have interaction and removal. And it's just one of those things where it doesn't feel great when your opponent just hatreds you and you die.
Right. But I mean, there are a lot of things that don't feel great that was happening in Magic at that time. This is. That was.
I would say most Magic cards that were good. Tinker, Voltaic Key, Grim Monolith, Grand Dynamo, Windfall, Tellurian Academy.
Yeah.
What was Randy Bueller thinking?
Very fair about 3 months after it was printed. So. It looks like the mono black player did mulligan down to 5 though. Okay, and we're getting the game started here. Mulligan to 5, and there is that turn 1 Carnophage. I don't think we're going to see what the play I just described because Dark Ritual is not legal, but off to the start.
I'll be honest, I kind of hope we do, but
not sure how that would happen. You could play a couple Lotus Petals to accelerate a little bit, but
yeah, could place out of Lotus Petals, turn 2 Hatred go. See a basic island.
Wait, an island? Do I have the wrong deck list?
I think we might have the wrong deck list. All right, we got 2 decks. One is halfway in the dark, and one is all the way in the dark.
Yeah.
And we can no longer see his battlefield. Okay.
All right. Carnophage, Dothi Slayer. Man, this just brings me back because I definitely played so much Magic when I was a teenager in the Tempest block time period. That was like definitely probably the year of Magic I played most when I was younger, and so this is definitely a nice flashback for me, which I think is a lot of the appeal of the format for old people like me is just the nostalgia.
Oh, for sure. Like honestly, that's one of the reasons why I'm enjoying it so much. Like. Just because of how the game has changed over time, if you're interested in being even mildly competitive, you can't play with these cards anymore in a format like Legacy. When we see an Aquamoeba,
all right, so we know what's going on now.
Okay, so yeah, so now we know what's going on. But yeah, you don't get to really play with these cards anymore. And honestly, the thing that I keep hearing from people, and it's something that I feel as well, is that like. The way the game feels in terms of like the texture of the game and the gameplay and having to set things up and that sort of stuff, I feel like you just don't get as much of that nowadays with how some of the new cards are printed. And the nostalgia factor for me comes from 1, playing with the actual cards, and 2, sort of like taking the game back to sort of I would say a lower power level place. And I really, really enjoy that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because, like, in some ways, like the spells, I think were at a higher power level on average, but there weren't these like top end snowball effect cards that like you resolve this planeswalker, and if you don't answer it right away, the game is out of control. There were really good draw spells, but it was like, that was your turn, was you're going to like cast Fact or Fiction.
Or your 3rd accumulated knowledge, or whatever it is. But yeah, I think I sort of feel the same way. It's just a little bit different gameplay, and getting to sort of go back to that, I think is great. And it's nice to see that it's like really popular.
Carnophage tapped and attacked with the Dothi Slayer because and he played a Lake of the Dead and a Phyrexian Negator.
And we see that Negator.
All right. It's ready for the suicide plan. Now, fortunately, his opponent is on Blue-Green Madness. So, I think it's pretty clear to Eric and I what's going on over there. And so if you didn't play in this era, Blue-Green Madness is a deck that uses some 2-mana creatures as discard outlets and a bunch of Madness spells. So Circular Logic is a counter spell for a single blue off of Madness. And they're Arrogant Worm, which is a 3, you can cast for 3 mana off Madness as a 4/4, and Basking Brute Wallow, which is you can play for free, is a 1/1 that you can like pay 2 to give it +2/+2 till end of turn. Those are like the key Madness cards. Aquamoeba and Wild Mongrel being the 2 key enablers.
Right, and then on top of that, the deck also plays some strong flashback spells. I think the best of which is Roar of the Worm. Which you flashback for 3 and a green, and you get a 6/6 worm token. And the 4 mana for a 6/6 is just extremely above rate for creatures at the time. One person is playing Phyrexian Negator here, and that's indicative of just how much worse the creatures were, quite frankly.
Yeah. Now if you have a 3 mana 5/5, it comes with like haste and trample. So this is interesting. I mean, he is just straight attacking with this Negator into this Aquamoeba. And Aquamoeba has the ability to discard a card and flip its power and toughness.
Right.
So
it can go up to 3
here and just make him sack 3 permanents. But he's got 1 card in hand, and maybe he just doesn't care.
Wow, if he only has one card in hand, he must have mulliganed quite a bit as well. Oh, and we see the hatred of the hatred. Dead.
So, all right. Well, I guess the question is, can he counter it? And usually the Madness decks play Circular Logic, and then maybe a couple of like other counter spells like Mana Leaks or Dazes. But he's got no cards in his graveyard, so the Circular Logics don't look like they're going to work. He's got one open mana as well to pay for a Daze.
Yeah,
this could just be game.
Yeah, I believe that Hatred has been errated to have the life paying as an additional cost for the spell. The templating on the original printing was that it says pay X life, like an actual ability,
right.
which indicated that you could pay the life as the spell was resolving, but now you actually have to pay the life up front. And it does look like it gets met with a mana leak here, which, is a good play, but it doesn't really look like he's extremely far ahead here.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to lose his Aquamoeba, but he's going to make his opponent sacrifice 3 permanents. Because he did block and discard the Yavimaya to the Aquamoeba.
So I think we're probably going to see the Lake of the Dead go, and then maybe the 2 smaller creatures. That would be my guess, but not sure.
I mean, he might be tempted to just sack the 2 lands on the Carnophage and see if between the Shadow Creature and a 5/5 after he kills this Aquamoeba, if he can get there.
Maybe.
But he's down to 5, and his opponent is at 16 until I guess he's going to connect for 4 more here. Or maybe 3 more. I'm not sure if the Carnophage untapped during his untap step or not.
Yeah, okay, so it looks like damage is happening. Oh, maybe the Aquamoeba didn't block the Negator? Oh, no, it looks like it did.
No, so he blocked the Carnophage. Wait. Oh, no.
No. He blocked the Negator. The Negator has trample, right?
Oh, it does have trample. Okay, I was like wondering how he went to 9. Okay, or 8.
Yeah, or it looks like he's at 8. Yeah.
All right, we've got 7 power. His opponent's at 8, and 2 of it's shadow. I mean, honestly, this 2/2 shadow can go a long way. I mean, he's playing against a blue-green deck. He's not going to be able to take it off the board. I mean, the answer to take it off the board is maybe deal damage to Negator. Otherwise, he's got to find a way to deal 5 damage to the mono black player pretty quickly here. Yeah,
and we see that Roar of the Worm. Oh wow, Arrogant Worm here is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, that's really so. Well, it's still a 2-turn clock, right? And he's not going to be able to get 8 in.
Yeah,
attacking with the Negator is super awkward.
Well, I don't think you can attack with a Negator here, and you have to imagine that Steve is going to be able to play another creature next turn because he has a couple cards in hand.
Well, he has the Roar of the Worm in the graveyard.
He's got the Roar of the Worm in the graveyard, and obviously the Negator can't block here because then he'll be left with no permanence.
Right. Yeah, he's an attack with the Arrogant Worm and take him to 1. So yeah, I don't see how the black player gets out of this. This is just the you live by the hatred and you die by the hatred. That's just how it goes. The same thing with Negator, and that's obviously what Ben signed up to do, was to try to get you with hatred and Negator. If it doesn't work, we on to the next game.
All right, Steve, thinking about the attack here. I mean, honestly, like, put yourself in Steve's seat, right? Maybe there's something like an Innocent Blood or whatever that'll like screw up combat for him. Although that might not work perfectly here, but you can imagine there being a removal spell that might clear out the worm and allow the Negator to attack, and then that'll end things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely imagine some things to be afraid of, but that he has no lands in play and 1 card in hand, right? So it's got to be like a land plus like a 1 mana spell.
Yeah. All right. We do see that Roar of the Worm flashback, so he'll get a 6/6.
Oh,
no
not
attacks.
attacking.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not sure it changes much. He's going to go to 4, and like if he attacks with both creatures here, like he has to block.
Right.
And then the negator will wipe his board.
And an Aquamoeba as insurance.
Discard a Wonder and get in the air,
Boom.
I guess. Don't even worry about the negator blocking.
Okay, and on to game 2.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what's in the sideboard. So
I can make out a couple cards here. I see 3 Masticore. I think I see 4 Sinkhole, but I'm not sure. Is that legal?
I don't think Sinkhole's legal.
No, it's not.
4 Phyrexian Furnace, so the graveyard hate card is there.
Yeah, that's that.
I think there's a couple Engineered Plagues on the right, which probably aren't doing much.
That's a
the
good
cards
call.
I can make out don't seem very good. It does look like those are Sinkholes, but I don't think Sinkhole's legal in this format.
Yeah. Yeah, on its surface, Engineered Plague, not great, but you could potentially name whatever creature type Aquamoeba is.
Yeah, then you can't discard cards to it.
And it makes it a 0 power creature.
Right.
But that's honestly not a great exchange.
No. Yeah, if he's got any removal spells, which if those middle cards are removal spells, that would be good. And obviously we don't have Steve's deck. He's in blue-green. So, there's definitely some green weird black hate cards that don't see play very often, like Compost.
Yeah.
Which was interestingly, Compost was in the sideboard of the deck that Rob sent us, which was not the
right.
not the deck that Steve is playing. But probably there's some extra counter magic in there, which I don't think is where you want to be. I mean, you need enough to counter hatred, probably. Like, you just don't want to die to hatred.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to counterspell like 1 mana black creatures isn't a good game plan. Like, you just want to get on board, I think. But
agreed. I'm trying to think if there's any good pro black creatures that Grid would want to play. Because I know that like the green-white deck has Mystic Enforcer, but he's not playing white, so he's not going to have access to that.
Right. I'm sure there are pro-black creatures in green. I just don't know what they are.
At least not any. I would say not any that immediately come to mind. But I'm sure there's a couple strong options out there.
My guess is like neither player has much to bring in. I mean, like generally in decks like this, like I have to assume you're devoting some amount of graveyard of sideboard hate to graveyard hate and to enchantment and artifact hate.
Right.
And so like I imagine those two things are eating up at least half of each player's sideboard. Although I guess black doesn't have access to artifact and enchantment hate, but yeah, so I imagine like there's probably pretty light sideboarding going on, with probably only cards that are like relatively versatile sideboard cards would be my guess. But
yeah, well, I think we're going to find out along with all of our viewers, so it should be fun.
Yeah.
Players shuffling up for game 2 here.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen probably not a ton of different aggro decks. I think in previous leagues we saw Goblins and Sly as like the main aggro decks that people play. And And then like most other decks haven't been like super aggressive. I think I saw like a red black aggro deck, like not really machine head, but more of like a black aggro deck, like similar to this, but splashing like red for bolts and like maybe lava mancers or something.
Yeah, I actually played that against a deck like that in the last league, and yeah, it's definitely aggressively slanted. I think one of the big problems that the aggro style decks have is the card Pernicious Deed. We were talking with Tweety after our match earlier this week, and I think there's a strong argument to be made that that's one of the strongest, if not the strongest, cards in the format. And there are a lot of strong contenders for that title, but that card just has a catch-all for effectively everything in the format. Really, really suppresses aggro decks because when the aggro decks don't have repeatable sources of damage in the form of creatures or Cursed Scroll or Sulfuric Vortex, that sort of thing, then they really just fold, and Deed answers it all.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Deed is definitely it's definitely a pillar of the format. I mean, if you look at rock decks in this format, you look at 90% of the deck and you're like, how is this a viable deck? It's like 4 mana 4/4s and some great hand disruption. But like Deed is really like the deck that holds the glue together in that deck. It answers everything. Your opponent plays problematic artifacts, enchantments, creatures. It answers all of them.
Gets it all, man.
And like so many times,
we should just ban Pernicious Deed.
I don't know. I think it's a good edge of like it's a good catch in the format. I think it keeps things like Enchantress and like artifact ramp in check, where you can't just like flood the board with mana accelerants.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think it's a fine card, and if that's one of the better cards in the format, then I think the format's in a pretty good place, honestly. It's exceedingly fair, and you can play around it. And if you choose to, you can basically ignore it as well. So that's the sign of, I'd say, good health.
Yeah. And they're like Wrath of God is legal in this format, but doesn't see a ton of play. Like the deck that plays it is the Landstill deck, and like I think even the versions of that I see, like people usually only play like 1 or 2 in the main deck.
Yeah, I mean it's you just don't see, it just doesn't see a ton of play. Oh wow, it looks like the lighting changed quite a bit there for Steven.
Yeah, got some mood lighting going on. Looks like at least the Mono B player did not have to mulligan to 5 this game. So
yeah. Oh yeah, that's actually a good point. He was on a mull to 5 that game, and if that Hatred didn't get mana leaked, he would have stolen that one.
Right, yeah. I mean, Hatred is a very powerful card. I mean, Eric mentioned earlier, like how much people hated it. It's definitely
aptly named.
Yeah, it's definitely a very powerful card. It can steal a game out of nowhere. It is an instant. So like you have to, like, if you can't counter it, you have to block everything. Or have an instant speed removal spell.
Yeah, and I think is that a Sarcomancy?
It is a Sarcomancy, yeah. So
yeah, that's it.
It's basically a 1 mana 2/2. It's an enchantment that makes it 2/2, but if you have no zombies, the enchantment deals you a damage during.
Yeah, they don't make them like they used to.
Yeah. So it's another 2 mana shadow, 2 power creature. I think this one has pro white. And yeah, I'm forgetting my Tempest block cards, but I think it's a 2/1 pro white.
That sounds right to me as well.
Shadow, an interesting mechanic outside of Tempest block, because it basically is unblockable, but also like can't block and is unblockable. But in Tempest block, there are a lot of shadow creatures. But.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like one of those classic parasitic mechanics in the sense that it only really interacts with other cards that it was printed with. Right. And now, like if you were to play a shadow creature in like Legacy, for instance, you're effectively guaranteed to not ever be able to block with it, and it will be unblockable.
Yeah, the Time Spiral Remastered, came out recently, and I was playing Sealed with a friend, and I played like there's like a 3-mana or there's like a 3/1 shadow blue creature, and I was like, oh, I got this 3/1 unblockable, and then he plays a 1/1 shadow creature. I'm like, wait, since when can a shadow creature be blocked?
You thought you had a True Name Nemesis, and you just had a
just had a 3/1.
Just had a 3/1.
So Wild Mongrel, I think the better of the two discard outlets coming down on turn 2. But I mean,
absolutely,
just flooding the board here with power
by a lot.
But the Wild Mongrel keeping the zombies at bay. Hymn to Torak. All right, well, we'll see some stuff come off of Madness off this Hymn to Torak.
Wow, I didn't know him was legal. Interesting.
Yeah, it's legal for a very weird reason in this format, because Fallen Empires is not legal, but the Anthologies set is legal, which
which had him
like
in
a
it.
pair of pre-constructed decks, but it had him in it.
Okay.
He did have an Arrogant Worm, but he obviously doesn't have mana to pay for the Madness, and I think that other card is a Powder Keg.
Powder Keg, yeah. Not exactly a premier removal spell, but Black Green really doesn't have access to that anyway, so it's forced to play things like Powder Keg, and Powder Keg for 0 or for 1 on this board, it's a 1/1, but you can imagine it doing more than that.
Yeah, I imagine like frequently in this matchup, a Powder Keg on 1 is a 2/1. So I think it's it's interesting. Like that card was like pretty played before the printing of Ratchet Bomb, and then now it seems like neither of those cards are really played. But
yeah, it's just one of the many cards that sort of, I don't want to say time is forgotten, but the overall power level has increased to the point where it's just not. It's not really playable anymore. You still see Ratchet Bomb show up in Legacy sometimes, and Ratchet Bomb and Powder Keg actually do see play in Vintage in shops in a very real way out of the sideboard.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally for those cards to be good, the format needs to be full of 1-mana permanents. So it looks like he's making a decision whether or not to tap this Carnophage. Looks like he kept it untapped, so he's going to attack into this Wild Mongrel, it seems.
Yeah. This is sort of like one of those things that you might not realize until you've played with or against the card, but when you're facing down a Wild Mongrel, it makes it almost impossible to attack, because the Wild Mongrel can block, and then they can just discard cards to make it exactly big enough to kill the opposing creature. And while that might sound like a good thing for you, they're discarding Arrogant Worms, other cards with Madness, cards with Flashback, so they're not really discarding cards. And it just makes combat an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, so this looks like the mono black player attacks with everything, and before blockers, looks like we're getting a Frantic Search.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit confusing, but Frantic Search does, so if you discard a Madness spell, you do get to untap your lands while the Madness effect is on the stack, and so you can cast a Madness spell off of your lands that you untap with Frantic Search.
Right, and I'm not sure what that card that was discarded was. It was an
Aquamoeba. Might have said Waterford Bouncer. Bouncer.
Okay, yeah, that's
another discard outlet that bounces things.
2-mana 2/1, I believe. Or no, it's a 1/2, and I believe it's a blue and a tap to discard a card and then bounce a creature.
Yeah. In this format, it's a sweet combo that like kind of saw some play back in the day with Gilded Drake, where you can like steal their guide and bounce your Gilded Drake and then steal their next guy. Very dirtily combo, but it's against creatures is pretty cool. But I think here it's mostly just a discard outlet that also has some utility.
Yeah, and I think Steve was sort of hoping to find a Basking Root while there, but he didn't have one. Or an Arrogant Worm, yeah.
You could discard another Aquamoeba to just make his Wild Mongrel 3/3 and block the one of the zombies.
Yeah. Notably, I believe the Carnophage is a zombie, so the Sarcomancy won't be triggering during the upkeep.
Right.
But a Dauthi Slayer, now effectively 4 damage a turn, that's going to be unblockable. So Yeah, he's got a decent clock going here, even though he's facing down a Wild Mongrel. But it's met with a mana leak and slowed down significantly.
But now, I mean, Steve is down to 1 card in hand. Now, you can turn the corner pretty quickly with something like an Arrogant Worm, because he does have a discard outlet, and just putting a 4/4 on board can turn. But I mean, he is facing at least 2 Shadow a turn.
Yeah, so honestly, it kind of feels like a top deck war a little bit here. Mono Black is attacking here, and I'd say that's a good sign that he's ahead.
Right.
But
and the Carnophage is interesting because he doesn't have to untap it and pay the life unless Steve attacks with Wild Mongrel. Yeah, and another Shadow creature is probably going to close the door unless he's got an Arrogant Worm like right here.
3 mana for an Intuition. Interesting. Okay. Let's see what we can get.
Yeah, I mean, I think usually when you cast Intuition in this deck, you're going to get like some Roar of the Worm, like a Roar of the Worm, a Deep Analysis, and a Wonder, something like that. Sometimes it's to look at your library.
Oh, no. It looks like Steve is just conceding here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at your library and realizing there's no way you can beat these 2 Shadow creatures. Yeah. And, like unblockable creatures are good. And so you get ahead and you have unblockable creatures. It's really hard. Like, and I thought he was in that situation last game, but that Arrogant Worm in his hand was like enough to flip the race last game.
Yeah. That was, that Arrogant Worm was really strong there, but I think honestly any creature would have been able to say been able to do it. But yeah, all right. So it looks like we're going to game 3 here. I have to think that play draw is actually very, very important in a matchup like this.
Right. Yeah. They're looking at their sideboards again, but yeah, I kind of doubt you change anything play draw here unless you just like realized you made a mistake in game 2. But
right, and
you're wrong.
I don't think they're looking to bring in Closet Gix against this deck. It just feels too narrow, even though there are quite a few graveyard interactions.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can exile a Wonder or something, but yeah, that's like if you're like, what are you taking out for that? Are you taking out a threat or a discard spell? Because it probably is better.
Oh, right. Well, we didn't see any pro-black creatures that game, but
yeah, I bet there's not any. Like I feel like we would be able to think of one if there was a good one.
Probably. But I'll be perfectly honest. One of the things I've been realizing is that like I've just forgotten a lot about a lot of the old cards that used to see play.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like there are a few players that like I know that are kind of like an encyclopedia. I think we're talking to Ty after our match, and like just like naming all these cards. I'm like, man, like I just don't remember all these cards, and some of them, like there are cards that are surprisingly playable in this format that like I just forgot existed because like they haven't been playable in 15 years.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and like you say, it haven't been playable in 15 years. One of the things I'm really curious about is like, let's say that there was a middle school GP or a middle school Pro Tour or something like that. Like, would the format condense into a couple decks, like Legacy or something like that, or would it remain as wide and would we just see like a really, really big reduction in the number of playable cards? I honestly don't know. It just feels like there's a much flatter power level, but
yeah, I've definitely had this conversation also. I think it would narrow a bit. Like I think there's probably not multiple control decks. Like there's probably like one best control deck, and the same might be true for aggro decks. Like like maybe maybe the right but like I feel like Sly and like creature based aggro decks are kind of like different angles that might be good in different metagames. So like there might be like multiple aggro decks. But combo decks, like I think they're gonna still be really wide. Like there's a lot of different angles you can attack with combos, and I think the mid-range decks is similarly will like retool for whatever the metagame is. So I think it would keep being a wide format, but I'm sure like, you know, a lot of people play decks that are just like nostalgic for them in this format, and I think that's cool. But you know, I think some of those decks just probably aren't the best.
For sure. And yeah, honestly, I think I'm okay with that. It's just it's like it feels like every other format it's just become so hyper competitive, and the amount of stuff that's playable is reduced over time a lot. And you know, it's sort of nice to be in this space and play with these really old, fun, interesting cards.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and it's not like, and like you said at the beginning, like there's a lot of decks that are just right below the surface. And I think like a lot of people's like pet decks that are just like tweaked versions of standard decks, like whether it's Madness is one of those, I think, is a standard deck.
Yeah.
And Psychotog, like these are decks that are like fine in this format. Like maybe they're not, like maybe they wouldn't be tier 1, but like they're not far down. Like you're going to play competitive games with them.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point, is that like, I feel like there's fewer non-games in this format than in general nowadays when you're looking at Eternal Magic. Like I feel like I have some amount of agency in every game, which can't be said for something like Vintage.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I have played some decks in some of the leagues that don't lend themselves to that. I think in the first league I played Devour Tinker combo, and the second league I played Hermit Druid combo. But so definitely had some non-games where like they disrupted my combo and I did nothing, or I killed them on turn 2. But
yeah. All
right. So we see start to last game, but you can see like how big of a difference being on the play makes. Like now he doesn't get a swing in with a zombie, and it's just like he has no good attack against this wild mongrel with a non-shadow creature.
All right, and we do see a shadow creature though.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how aggressive Steve wants to play this. Like, you know that if you let the game go on too long, you just keep taking beats from shadow creatures. So like, does he just start swinging with wild mongrel, or does he have like another threat behind it?
I think you can start attacking with wild mongrel here if you have exactly Arrogant Worm, and it doesn't look like he does.
Yeah.
But with 3 mana up, you have to imagine he has some play. It could be a Frantic Search. It could be you know, maybe he has access to a Basking Rootwalla or 2, but you know, passing the turn with 3 open mana here is an indication that he's got something going on.
Right. Like I'm sure he has like a Mana Leak, Circular Logic, or Frantic Search. Like maybe like I have to imagine if he had Arrogant Worm, he attacked with Wild Mongrel. It'd be really hard for me to put him on Arrogant Worm.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like Frantic Search. So Careful Studies of sorcery. He's either got like Frantic Search or some counter magic. Maybe a Rootwalla. Even Rootwalla, though, I think you attack with Wild Mongrel, though, right?
I think so. Ooh, Cabal Therapy is interesting here. Yeah.
We'll see how if he has the same read as us, that it's not Wild Mongrel. I mean, it's not Arrogant Worm, and it's not Basking Rootwalla, so it must be Frantic Search or Circular Logic.
Yeah, well, Cabal Therapy is an interesting card, regardless, because you're basically you basically can't name cards with Madness, because if you hit, then they get to Madness the card out, right?
Right.
So,
right, yeah.
It's definitely an interesting card in the matchup. There's enough cards in the deck that you care about that don't have Madness where it's still fine. But I think it can make some interesting situations with what card you want to name and how you want to play it from the Madness side.
Yeah, I mean, I think playing it on turn 1 and naming Wild Mongrel was like always good. But
yeah, it has to be. I think Mongrel is sort of like the premier threat in the deck.
Yeah. It seems like he's Googling a lot of cards right now, trying to make a decision on what he wants to name, which is reasonable. I think, I'm sure, like Eric and I, other people don't remember every card in this wow, did he hit 2 mana leaks?
Ooh,
So that is insane.
That's gotta hurt.
Oh my gosh. That feels bad, man.
Yeah, that's pretty savage.
Man, I would have been really tempted to.
I think I would have fired one of those mana leaks off. I mean, eesh.
I don't know, but do you really think he's going to name Mana Leak? I guess it's like you name Mana Leak or Circular Logic or Frantic Search. Like those are like the only cards you're naming. Like if you had a Aquamoeba, you're probably casting it.
Okay, so back in the day, there used to be a Madness Zone. Do you remember this? Where you could like discard a Circular Logic and then counter the next spell your opponent played. Do you remember that?
I don't, but I
don't know if that's how it still works.
I think I played like Sealed once in Odyssey block, but I wasn't like really playing Magic at the time.
Yeah,
I played after Urza's block.
Yeah, quite a bit of Blue-Green Madness back in the day. One, because it was a good deck, and two, because I was a kid and it was really inexpensive. Like almost every card in the deck is a common or an uncommon.
Right, for sure, yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why it's all out of play. Okay, we see another Shadow Threat here.
Man, that therapy was insane.
Yeah, it's super good.
Oh.
It's even a little bit better because this Frantic Search is, technically another card disadvantage spell, and he just got 2 for 1, and he's going to be able to flashback that Cabal Therapy using that zombie token because it's totally locked down by the Wild Mongrel anyway. So really good position here for the mono black player.
Yeah, although it's going to be tricky to use the therapy from here. I mean, you saw the rest of his hand and there was nothing basically he could name. Like there was a Wonder, which he knows he wants to discard anyway, and a Frantic Search, which he could respond with. He didn't choose to flash it back immediately.
Oh, and a Wild Mongrel attack. Okay, so maybe Steve found an Arrogant Worm here.
Yeah, or at least some sort of threat. But it's still going to be hard to race. Well, I guess he's still at 18. Like he's facing down 4 power. Okay, well he's hellbent, and he's got some Grizzly Bears and a 1/3.
All right, so what's the best draw on the deck for Steve now that he's hellbent?
I mean, it's still got to be like Roar of the Worm or Arrogant Worm, right?
Yeah. I guess Roar of the Worm because that puts the biggest creature in play.
Yeah. But
effectively playing around that Cabal Therapy in the graveyard by not having a hand. It's Galaxy Brain. Good stuff. Good stuff.
I guess we can like Magical Christmas Land, like the top of the deck is a Frantic Search plus an Arrogant Worm and a Basking Rootwalla, or an Arrogant Worm plus a Roar of the Worm.
Yeah. Hey, I know it sounds like Magical Christmas Land, but that is potential for what could actually happen. So, second zombie, not doing much here. Worth noting, there is a Wonder in the graveyard, so all of Steve's creatures do have flying.
Yep. All right, just flooding the board with 2/2s. I mean, if nothing else, it just makes it hard for Steve to just take advantage of his flying and just swing out, because he knows like every creature that attacks, it's like 2 more damage he could take on the back end.
Yeah, and he is on the back foot here. He's down in life. He's down in total power on the board, and a total number of creatures. So by effectively every metric, he is behind. But he does have some powerful draws. Like, if he could intuition here for 3 Roar of the Worm, that actually might be the dream.
Yeah, but he can't cast them right away. So I mean, he's going to take 4 more and go to 10 before he gets to cast the first one. Yeah, combat math is tricky. Slow. Like maybe he could just take. Maybe he has to attack so that he has lethal. I don't know. I can't do the math.
Well, let's see. Mono Black's at 18. So Yeah, I'm just trying to find a path to victory for Blue Green Madness here.
I mean, he's got effectively 7 in the air. So like if he attacks for 7, if he had a Roar of the Worm here, he attacks for 7, and then he's got 13 next turn. Like he would win that race. Like if he just had drawn a Roar of the Worm, he wins the race because he's got flying, he can't be blocked.
Okay. And he does pay 2 to keep the Carnifexes untapped here. Or so, that indicates he's planning on attacking with them.
Yeah, I mean, he's only got 1 card. So so if he blocks with both Wild Mongrels, he's going to lose one of them. So, Suicide Black doing Suicide Black things and just attack at all costs. But looks like he's maybe regretting his decision to untap them.
Maybe it's going to be really difficult for Steve to present lethal next turn, though. It could be impossible.
Yeah, I think it's impossible. I think the most he can present is Roar of the Worm here, but I mean he is too late for that. So he can Arrogant Worm and then draw. It doesn't really matter what he draws.
Well, he could. What if he intuitions for 3 accumulated knowledges? Cast accumulate. No, I'm serious. Cast accumulated knowledge hits the 4th accumulated knowledge, and then after that he would have. Yeah, and then you discard 1 Aquamoeba because you get more power out of that.
Right.
So he'd get a draw for the turn. He'd draw 3 off of the 1st accumulated knowledge, then go down 1, so that's 3 cards, and then draw 4. So he'd have 7 cards in hand. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 6,
14,
and I think it's 13. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like he still wouldn't have enough.
Oh, and he didn't have it. Just drew a forest.
Yeah. But it looks like he's just going to block and take out 2 of the tokens and take 6. Yeah, it's not like a super great attack. Like he traded 2 creatures to get in 2 extra damage. I guess he traded 2 for 1 and got 2 extra damage in. But that 2 extra damage means it's a 2-turn clock off the 2 shadow creatures, so that is pretty relevant.
Right. Yeah, it's really the turn that matters here. Okay, so we find a careful study. Yeah, unfortunately, even when you're hellbent, you have to cast it. Island and I mean, you got to be happy they're not on top of your deck, but not looking good here. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any drawing out of this at this point.
Let's see.
You're taking 4, and then you're taking 4. You have to win next turn somehow.
Maybe a bounce spell, something that can tap the shadow creatures down. Is Steve packing it up? Yeah, it looks like it. Oh, and it was a hatred off the top anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah. So those unblockable creatures doing what they do and attacking. So pretty good. But man, that Cabal Therapy was the all-star of that game. It's one of my favorite cards in this format. Cabal Therapy and Meddling Mage. I just love, and then Factor Fiction. I just love the kind of skill test of all those cards.
Yeah, I do think that Factor Fiction is probably I think it's up there with the most skill testing cards of all time, just because you have when you're actually making the piles for it. I mean, sometimes it's very obvious, and sometimes you're just going to lose no matter what. But sometimes you really have to understand the game state and what your opponent needs, what they don't have. You have to infer what they don't have, but based on the way they've been playing, all these sorts of things. Defense grids in the sideboard. Those look like those came in.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, defense grid's fine in the matchup. Your opponent's probably playing 8 to 10 counter spells, or maybe not that many. But
I mean, but if you're just going to Cabal Therapy and hit all of them anyway, who needs defense grid, right?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, I'm joking, of course, but yeah, defense grid seems fine.
But also the negators seem like a liability, and that's what.
Yeah, those got to come out in the creature matchups for sure. But
the crit scrolls seem good to me, though. I'm a little surprised you cut those, but
yeah, I mean, the mono black deck goes hellbent pretty quick. So I am a little bit surprised to see that come out.
It looks like he brought in Mastercore instead, which I guess is fine. Like it's a creature that 1/3s don't block well, but
yeah, it does combat pretty well, which I think it's sort of the main attraction. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's going to be everything for us today. Now that's the end of our second match. I believe we're planning on doing a stream next week as well. Is that right?
Yeah. I think every Thursday, and then I think I think we're in week 4, so we have 2 more rounds of Swiss. So the next 2 Thursdays we'll get some more matches in, and then I think we'll. In the past, we tried to do the top 8 kind of like all in one big evening of streaming. So we'll see, or maybe just the top 4. So it should be 3 more weeks of this league, and then I think we're going to start another one right after. So plenty more middle school to watch. And I know personally, I lurk on the Discord and watch everyone's matches I can when I'm free. So, so anyway, yeah, thanks. It was a good time. I think saw 4 different cool decks, and we'll see some more next week.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a blast as always, and see everyone next week and next league.